And you.
Okay.
We are live once again, and you have a story, don't you, Pat?
Yes, I do.
Can't stand
it. We were talking about leadership and mentoring, and I got an invite on LinkedIn one day, and it was a VP of a hospitality company in Georgia. And of course, I don't just accept these unless I look at the person's profile, and I happened to look at what people were saying about the recommendations. And what I liked about that was they were saying great things about this VP, because this goes back to the importance of leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I accepted, and I said, how about virtual coffee? He said, he sent me a note back, here's my number, tomorrow morning, and I'm not buying. And, and I said, you got a deal. But the thing I liked about that and how that story fit in, as I talked to him, I said, the reason I wanted to know more about you is that the housekeepers were saying fabulous things about you as their leader. Now, he was a VP in the organization. And I said, so I want to know what your magic is. At the base of the organization, you've got somebody giving you great comments. And he said, you know, Miss Leonard, I started at the bottom. And he said, I always committed to myself that as I move up in the organization, I will never forget the bottom. And I think that is key to the success of the future of where we're taking businesses and what we've been talking about in mentorship. He took care of them, and he still speaks up for them. And he's now a mentor to the senior level and a mentor to the base level. And I love that story. Thank you very much for letting me share it, because I felt like it was very important in what we were talking about and where we're going as a society around leadership and the value of mentorship.
Excellent point. Very, very good. And that whole, you never know where somebody's starting from. Some people don't start from the bottom. And so they have to maybe perhaps be trained to remember these folks have values, they have opinions, they have a brain, they have a lot to offer you that you probably don't get to see just from emptying waste baskets in this case or whatever. So given that, Craig, take that a little bit further, then expand on that, if you would, that whole mentality of giving value to folks who, according to the organizational chart, are far, far below you.
Yeah, I was listening to Patricia's story, and that's how I grew up. So I grew up in Holiday Inns. My mother and father are both Holiday Inn innkeepers. So they were also troubleshooters. So by the time I went to high school, I went to 14 different schools, give you an idea. And so that's a lot.
Just couldn't stay with one.
We got thrown out of some of the best places.
He was really kicked out.
I thought I had the record, but I stand corrected.
That's right. And so, that's right. And so I did. I mean, at 11 years old, I was doing front desk when it was still a switchboard, if you can imagine that. And I was calling at 11 years old. I'd go around and I'd find things to do. I would help. Back then, you would wrap the glasses that go in the room with, put a little thing on top after it gets out of the dishwasher and all that kind of stuff. And so all kinds of things. So that I always am picturing that, and I always thought that was really good. But my parents had the same type of response from the people, because my dad looked at everybody and this was a time when race was a big issue. So some of the places we went in Mississippi were highly race riot-ish. We moved to Memphis right before Martin Luther King got shot. But in every case, I never knew there was a difference between races. I never knew there was a difference between level. I never knew there was a difference, because my dad treated everybody equally. And my dad treated, and so that's just how I grew up. So I can relate to that story. My dad used to say, the fish stinks from the head first. And so if you have a problem, it's coming from the head of the organization. And so if you think there's an issue with the culture, well, for example, leadership drives culture. And it's usually your direct supervisor that gives you the opinion of what the culture of the company's like. And so that is very important. To build that culture requires people who are down to earth, understand the people under them, and also understand that even if they grew up doing all of those chores, climbed the ladder, was at the very bottom, that they no longer know how that work's done because technology has passed them by. And so they have to put their opinions on hold on how best to do that job and rely on the subject matter experts that are currently doing that job and create a vision so they can work together. So I don't know if that answered your question, Denny, but that's what came to my mind, and I think it was important.
Well, with a 14 school education like yours, I can understand why you would have.
What that means in real life is that I never really learned how to read because I was always going into starting over in a different method and everything else. So I tell everybody I'm nearsighted, farsighted, and dyslexic. So if I make a mistake, just kind of expect it and help me correct it.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah, so many lines I don't want to use now because I'm going to insult somebody in the process. But speaking of the fact that other people are involved and have a say in the matter, Craig, if you would, we're 3 people here today, but there are 5 of us involved in some capacity or the other. 2 of them couldn't be here today. So Craig, if you would introduce one of those folks to us at this point.
I'm going to introduce Ann Jagger. Ann Jagger is a partner of mine. She handles the business side of the businesses we're in, and she also handles a lot of the marketing. I concentrate, me being an engineer, I concentrate on the operations side. I'm an industrial systems engineer by training, but I rely on her heavily. She has a lot of wisdom. She's a serial entrepreneur. That's how she introduces herself. And she's also an author. She's also she's a publisher. We do real estate together. We do online stores together. We do consulting together in different ways. And without her, I don't think I would be able to do half the amount of things I'm doing now. She's in another state, and I only see her by Zoom, but we've worked together for a little while. Kind of like Patricia, I have a lot of respect for her, and without Patricia, then it just makes the picture bigger to have people who have these different points of view adding to the subject. So she'll be on in future podcasts, and she may take more of a timekeeper role or something, but she is very important to this process.
Yeah.
And I would also like to then add a minor player perhaps at this point would be my wife, Sandy. Sandy is a story architect. She is a writer, and she recently got her Master of Fine Arts degree from Lipscomb University. And her bent is all about story expansion. And that's why she's a story architect. The architect has the grand plan that everybody else fills in the blanks on and builds into something significant. And she's the kind of person who can take your story and say, I know what you can do with that, and take it a place perhaps you hadn't thought of doing. And that's an element I know that she would want to bring to any entity, including this kind of podcast. In the process of talking business, you can't do that without all kinds of stories, all kinds of illustrations. You've already given us one, Patricia. And so that mentality of the best way to reach people is through story, because we all have one, is what she brings to the table. And she's really cute too, but that's
good thing you think so, because that's your wife. So I think Patricia and I talked about a little earlier. We want to make sure we understand what you guys are doing, because you have a whole slant on things that you do related to your other endeavors. So could you expand on that a little bit?
Right. Well, as I said before, we want to help people laugh away the darkness. And people used to say, well, what darkness is that? And then 2020 came along, and it's okay.
Now they know.
Oh, that. And so, and as you can tell, my bent is humor. And I've got a lot of background. The radio that you mentioned, I did 12 years of morning radio for a Christian radio station. We broke the mold in that we were funny. We did a lot of comedy. We did a lot of sketches and things like that, and a lot of irreverence. And you think, well, in a Christian radio setting, you can't be irreverent. You've got to be reverent. we were irreverent 90% of the time, so that when we did say something that had any meat to it, we already made friends. We already had people on our side, and they were ready to listen to something a little weightier. So that's been our bent all along. Sandy and I have been doing, well, we met on stage, and we've been doing stage work and then television and then radio for years and years now, as a team and separately. But we like to work as a team because of that very thing, that 80-20 rule of 80% fun and 20% something to take home with you. Yeah. So that's where I'm coming from. I would love to add some of those elements of comedy and humor. You may have picked up on that already. If you haven't, I haven't done a very good job then. And so there it is. Cue the laugh track. There it is. I'm all about wanting to make this fun because, one, I'm a joy bringer. That's well, okay, that's the name God gave me. All right, I'll just put it that way. One day in one of my worst moods ever, and I'm fussing and fuming out for some power walk, and all of a sudden I hear that you're my joy bringer, and I'm going, yeah, I know, I do that every morning on the radio. He goes, no, that's your name. And that kind of changed everything. It's like, okay, this is who I'm built to be, is to bring joy to whatever situations I'm in. So I want to make something that can become dry if you're not careful, businessy kind of stuff.
Yes.
I don't think that's going to happen with present company, but if I can help make it a little more fun and still keep people going someplace where they walk away with something they can latch onto, then I've done my job. So.
Oh, wow, I love that. That's super. We need that in the world.
Right.
Bravo, Denny.
And by the way, I am doing a podcast. One of the big things I'm doing right now is audio books that we're now turning into podcasts. And I have another podcast. It's geared toward kids, tweeners and young teens in that age group. And it's a book that a good friend of mine, Jenny L. Cody, wrote called The Ark, the Reed, and the Fire Cloud. And we've taken that book that's all about the Ark from the perspective of the animals, and we've turned it into an entire podcast with me adding some things with the characters, because I do all the voices. And so I've turned it into just a little show that they do, and then they give you a chapter of the book each week. And we're having just a blast with that with the younger set. So I get to do my silliness with them too.
I love that. You know, may I tell another story?
Please.
My grandson is, when he was 6 years old, I said, Gavin, what do you want for Christmas? And this goes to your story, Denny. And he said, he had some kind of toy. And I said, I'm not buying toys. We got to come up with something different. I said, you want to write a book? And he said, I'm only 6 years old. That's for adults. And I said, no, Gavin, we're going to write a book. So I asked him 3 questions about a lot of different subjects. School, but the one thing that really stuck with me, anyway, he has a book on Amazon now. 6 years old, we put a book on Amazon called Gavin's World, yes. And it's just mentoring, that it goes right back to our changing the concepts in their head. Like he said, I'm only 6 years old, I can't do that. But he did, because I asked him questions, and then he watched me type it out. I just used his language. I did not, yes, I did.
Yeah, leave that
and
alone.
You know, I think the funny thing is, one of the questions I asked him, what do you like to do at school, Gavin? He said, Mom, Pat, I like to pledge allegiance to the flag. And I said, well, these are the 3 questions. Well, why is that important? He said, because it reminds me that I am free. And I asked the 3rd question, how do you live that out in your life every day, Gavin? He said, well, when Mom and Dad and I go shopping at Target, that's his favorite place. When we go shopping at Target, he said, if I see a policeman, he said, you know, my uncle's a policeman in LA. And I said, yes. He said, if I see a policeman or a military person, I salute.
Wow.
Now, 6 years old, do you see what I'm saying? We are mentors, and to change the image in children's head, adults' head, we were talking about leaders, it is really critical sometimes to guide them through that, to take them through that. And I love, Denny, what you're talking about, because I think the best thing is make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
I have been a magician in corporate America. I dress up like all these things. I have a one-woman show. I mean, it's crazy. Oh, yeah, we got to go.
No, I have an addition to that. So that was a
you
good,
got an addition.
Yeah, see, that was a good story. I have the opposite of that. So when I was 6 years old, when I was 6 years old, we were driving down the road and I said, "Look, Dad, there goes the fuzz."
Oh.
And that's when the tormentor came out. And my dad, he stopped the car on the side of the road. And this is the 60s, right? So everybody's saying laugh in was big, you know.
Oh, yes.
It's early 70s, something like that. So he stopped the car and he says, "If I ever hear you say something like that again, you know, you're in big trouble." So there's a little bit of tormentor in the mentoring in order to get
your
to
dad
the good
must
example.
have known my dad.
That's
Wow.
right.
Wow. Well, that's a good place to leave it, I think.
Okay.
Leave it in the hands of the police. That's what I always say. And so as we'll ponder these things some more,
Yes.
keeping things in mind though, but this is what we're all about, is to change mentor. In other words, to bring you along in your business leadership skills, maybe a little further than you were yesterday. And what was your little tagline, Patricia? With
We
plans
turn
and dreams?
tents into cans and dreams into plans. We are the change mentors.
Ooh,
I like it.
there's your cut.